Dave, I do not get superheroes.
Oh my God, I don't get you. What don't you get?
TowerBot here. Well, the meatbags were going to say that if you're a geek and like podcasts, then you could try Tower of Technobabble at www.toweroftechnobabble.com. Then this started. Well, it's up to you. I'm gonna get my taser and put a stop to this. TowerBot out. Okay, monkeys. It's nap time.
Hi, this is Mark, and you're listening to episode 28 of Nerdology, brought to you by CSO, the Cult Fanzine. And my very special guests today are Mr. Dave Davis and Simon Brett. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
Just dandy.
Yeah, I've got the doors open, patio doors open.
Lovely. We are recording on May the 4th, so that's Star Wars Day.
Yeah.
Happy Life Day.
So we're talking about Star Wars.
Well, I just thought we should mention it.
Do you know, we may touch on it. There's a big reason.
Yeah, it could kind of come under the auspices of what we're looking at. And also, of course, yesterday was Comic Book Day, Free Comic Book Day.
It was.
Sometimes we celebrate all weekend long, so it's still Free Comic Book Day.
Did you partake, Dave?
I'm planning to later this afternoon. Where I'm at, we're right next to Louisville, Kentucky, and the Kentucky Derby was yesterday, which basically really is...
That's a pretty big thing.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. It's 2 minutes of horse racing, and they celebrate for 2 solid weeks here.
Nice.
So it's a whole thing.
So I'm just trying to get my head around this whole Free Comic Book Day thing. I am a complete comic book novice. So does this mean you can just walk into a comic book store and just help yourself to any comic that you like, or
well,
how does it work?
They do have
depends,
certain...
Yeah, I was going to say, it depends how well you know the owner.
That's true.
Oh, okay.
They actually just frown upon you just taking things off the shelves. They're actual free comic books that they have set aside for this special occasion. Basically, it's a way to get people into into the habit of walking into a comic book store and walking out with comics.
See.
Preferably
so they
paying.
Start you off on the freebies, and then they get you hooked on. The hardcore
just
stuff.
like crack.
Yeah.
Your first taste is free, and then we'll talk.
Oh,
so Simon, I understand you went to a comic fair yesterday. Is that right? Or there was a big event?
No.
No.
I won't tell you the event I went to afterwards because it's quite embarrassing. But no, before that,
you can't say that and then not tell us.
Yeah, that's not fair.
I went to a flower festival.
Wow.
See, I had something much more embarrassing in mind. But,
Yeah, I had something much more dubious. But anyway, carry on.
Oh, did you?
Well, just in my imagination, but then that says more about my imagination. So yes, anyway, you were going to tell us. Yes. You were going to tell us about your.
Yeah. No, I went to I went to a small place. People I know, and basically what they do is they buy in. There'll be a range of comics by the various companies, and they'll actually put together special editions, which they obviously sell very cheaply.
Okay.
I could tell you how cheap. It's a matter of pence, but when you get these free comic books, they're not free because the shop themselves have bought them in.
Yeah, I see.
Try and get people in, but they're getting them at a special deal anyway. And it's funny you saying about it being a way of hooking people and getting them in. There were some really good titles there which tie into movies that are about to come in and quite popular characters from cartoons. So they were going for all age ranges, all types of fan. There was stuff that was based on like Simpsons, and there was obviously the big Marvel titles, and there was like Guardians of the Galaxy special editions. Have
there been any big comic book movies? I'm not really aware of any.
No, not since Green Lantern.
That was a good one. You're a big DC fan, aren't you, Simon?
I love DC.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave's not in on this joke. Simon is not a fan of DC at all.
Oh, good, because I thought this was going to be a very awkward podcast.
Do you know what I would love? I would love to like it. I'd like to read as many comics as possible, but you just end up Obviously, you end up picking up on your favourites, but
this could get a bit awkward because my very limited comic book experience was back when I was a teenager, and the few that I really read were Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns and The Killing Joke. So they're pretty much all DC, aren't they?
Yeah, but you've just listed the 3 best titles ever by DC.
Oh, well, there you are then.
Yes, you have a very discerning taste, because yes, that was pretty much the high watermark of DC.
Mm-hmm. And it's all been downhill since then.
Well, they just completely scuttled their lines, in my opinion, with the New 52. I cannot get into any of that.
I'm trying to get my head around this. So, just for those who aren't perhaps in the know, this New 52, is it?
Yeah. Well,
they've taken all their characters and just started them off again on New Adventures, or how does it work?
Yeah, about 2 years ago, I think. About 2 years ago now. They just ended all their lines with a couple of exceptions and started everything off at number 1 and completely redid their continuity. They just stopped and rebooted the entire universe.
Clean slate.
Almost. They didn't do that with Batman. And Batman and Green Lantern, I think, were the 2 that they really didn't completely cut back to 0.
Right.
But they just and what they did with them, I didn't really care for. They didn't stay true to a lot of the characters. It just made a big mess of the entire thing.
I'm interested to know what it is about Marvel that really turns you both on that DC don't seem to do. Is there something you can really put your finger on, or is it a bit more?
It's you can rewind right to when it first started. In some respects, they attacked. You know, I'm not going to fudge the issue. The fact that DC were the first. They were the first to start, as far as I'm aware. Sort of 1938 with Superman and
what we would recognize now.
Yeah. But the difference being with Marvel, or what was it? I'm trying to remember. Was it Timely? Is it when it first started, Dave? I'm trying to think. It was Timely Publications or something, wasn't it? Which had Captain America, Submariner, the early stuff.
Yeah, I can't.
But then it's when Stan Lee got involved and he turned it into Marvel Comics, and he did this thing of sticking them into a semi-real world. So you'd have superheroes where when they're in their normal guise, then they've got jobs. And they've still got to go out earning money, and they've still got real problems. They've still got girlfriend problems. And that was the big difference, and that's followed through in a lot of ways. And I don't think DC have ever really caught onto that in the right way.
Yeah, there's...
Sorry, carry on, Dave.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, my major sort of way of catching up on comic books really is through the movies these days, and I just get the impression that the Marvel movies have more of a sense of humour and a bit more fun about them, whereas the DC franchises tend to take themselves a lot more seriously.
That's part of it. In the early 60s, when the Marvel Universe really started as we recognize it now, Spider-Man had to worry about his sick aunt and, paying the bills, paying the rent. The Fantastic Four were basically a family. And you just didn't see that sort of quote-unquote realism in the DC Universe. They were all larger than life, whereas, being bitten by a radioactive spider didn't pay your rent. You still had to, make ends meet.
Classic comparison is you got Bruce Wayne, who's this multi-millionaire with his mansion and stuff, and then on the flip side, you've got Peter Parker, who's just this kid who works for a newspaper. Yeah,
through inaction, his uncle got shot, and he has felt guilty about it for the past 50 years.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of call to adventure, isn't there, with the Marvel characters, that a lot of the heroes didn't want to be heroes.
Yeah, they were kind of thrust. It was thrust upon them.
Yeah,
and the other thing is, it didn't. All the DC stuff happens in made-up cities. I mean, Metropolis is a stand-in for New York, and you could say Gotham City is a stand-in for probably Chicago. But everything in the Marvel Universe happens. There's actual places, actual landmarks. That sort of thing. So it was grounded more, I think, in reality.
And they've actually had real-time events as well, haven't they, involved in the Marvel comics as well, isn't it? Haven't they? 9/11 was referenced, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Kind of obliquely. There was a special issue. I think it was Spider-Man who did it, where it was right after it happened. It was sort of a memorial in that. And since so many of the Marvel heroes are based in New York, it was a way they couldn't really tie it into the main storylines because Thor could have stopped them, but it was it was a nice touch, I thought.
I can imagine it's quite a difficult thing to write because you've got to be so sensitive towards people's feelings.
Yeah, and it was handled really well. I think.
That's another thing, isn't it? Sensitivity. There is a sensitivity to Marvel Comics.
Yeah, and Marvel is based primarily in New York, so there was a feeling of, they knew they were there when it happened, so there was a better feeling for it.
So this whole DC New 52 thing, have Marvel ever attempted anything like that, or have they just tended to stick with their own continuity and they kind of carry on as they were?
They have continued. There's never been a reboot. There's been a couple of false starts. I think there was a Heroes Reborn line in the 90s, which was the 90s were pretty much a lost era for comic books in general.
Yeah.
Things
because they talk about the golden age, don't they, and the silver age. I mean, I don't really.
Yeah,
that doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me. Apart from the golden age must have been that bit better than the silver age. But is there a bit more to it than that?
There's some loose markings. There's the golden age was basically when Superman and Batman that first got started. The silver age was basically when the Marvel age got started. And then,
so you would both argue that the Silver Age is better than the Golden Age?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's fun. It's interesting you saying about the sense of humour thing with DC, because I have a theory that the DC characters work better in a more light-hearted, literally comic-y
I think
scenario.
I know where you're going with this.
Well, I just think I love
Adam West.
Well, yeah. That is great, Batman. And that's where it works. And you've got all the different characters like the Joker and the Penguin and things like that. And they too do this thing now with the Tim Burton. Oh, dear. Excuse me, that's my phone going off. I'll just throw that away.
So the Tim Burton thing just made it a whole darker experience, but not necessarily for the better.
Yeah, that second Tim Burton Batman film, that's one I don't go back to. It's a little dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with the whole Adam West thing, certainly as a kid, I think we were all of a similar age. When I was growing up in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, that version of Batman was on the TV pretty much the whole time, and that was kind of my first introduction to that character. And it seemed, I mean, looking at it now, it looks incredibly campy and, really sort of Technicolor, but it's a lot of fun, and I think as a kid you took it really seriously. I don't know, did you watch that when you were growing up, Dave?
Yeah, and it's funny, as a kid I did take it seriously, and I couldn't get why my dad was laughing. And it actually kind of made me mad at the time. Why are you laughing at this? How are they going to get out of this trap?
And of course you had Catwoman for the dads as well, so...
Oh, yeah. Ooh, ow.
Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah, I absolutely do. And even when I see bits of it now, I just think it's great. And I think that's the kind of level at the end of the day, is a man running around dressed as a bat. And,
wearing his underpants over the top of his tights.
Yes, this is the thing. I mean, all that comes from when they were... Because that was all based on wrestlers, wasn't it? That was the whole idea why Superman had
the
pants over the top.
Yeah, the strongman uniform. Which in the New 52, he does not have that anymore. So... screw that up too.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is there's almost like this missing link between the humour of those days and then the ones now. When you look at the movies based on the DC characters, they seem to have this obsession with sticking them all in Kevlar and darkening down Superman. I mean, it
seems to be the way they're going with movies, because I mean, I have to admit, I'm probably the only person in the world. I haven't seen any of the new Transformers films.
You're okay.
But it's taking something that's like a kid's toy, and from what I gather, it's turning it into this kind of fairly adult world where you've got sort of girls in skimpy outfits and big explosions. And...
We have a term for it over here. I don't know if you all have this, but we term it disaster porn.
Oh, God.
When basically you're destroying... I mean, in the third Transformers film, they just basically destroy Chicago. In Man of Steel, they destroy Metropolis. Somebody did an estimated body count. The body count of Man of Steel would have been like 135,000.
Wow.
Because they completely flattened basically the middle of New York.
God. That's nearly up there with Resurrection of the Daleks.
Do they destroy New York in that?
Not in that one, but they did go around killing a lot of people. I think they worked out there's more deaths in that than there was in the original Terminator movie. which is going some.
Yeah, people just watch Doctor Who for the body count.
Yeah, as your good friend Ben would do.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Ben.
Hello, Ben.
So
You said Doctor Who. If you say it 2 more times, he'll appear.
Doctor Who, Doctor Who. No, he's definitely not turned up. You would have heard him by now.
Yeah.
Without going into that subject, if we're talking the Moffat days, not many people tend to die in Stephen Moffat Doctor Who, do they?
No, just this once everyone lives.
Yay.
Dave will have no idea what we're going on about.
Oh, I've watched the modern ones.
Yeah, because of course there were Doctor Who comic books, weren't there?
Oh, yeah.
And some of the from what I understand, the greats of British comics were involved in the Doctor Who comics. I mean, Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons were quite heavily involved, weren't they, for a while?
Trying to think what Alan Moore did on that side. I know he did some Star Wars. I'm not sure whether
I think he did some of the Tom Baker ones.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I had no idea. I missed some of those then.
Yeah.
But I mean, this was how it was for me with Marvel. I discovered Marvel through obviously in the UK from about 1972 onwards. They actually put together Marvel UK, where they reprinted a lot. Whereas you would usually get Marvel comics literally by picking up imported comics that would turn up in certain newsagents, they decided they would start reprinting them. And with the printing the way it was in this country, they decided they were going to print them in black and white.
Oh,
so, yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the classic comics that Dave will know from his childhood, I first saw in black and white. And if I was lucky, grayscale.
wow.
Yeah, absolutely. They would
Knowing
literally
you,
recolour
Simon, you
them.
probably spent a lot of time colouring them in.
I did. I have so many comics that would have been worth a fortune. No, none of them. Do you know none of those reprints are worth much, really? Probably the Doctor Who's and the things that had original artwork and that in them.
Yeah, but not even for the difference of having the monochrome, or not really.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But no. But my earliest Marvel comic was probably a fantastic. No, it wasn't. It was Supervillain Team Up from 1974, I think it was 75, which was a team up between the Submariner, who was classed as a villain, teaming up with Doctor Doom, against the Fantastic Four. And I got that from my uncle and aunt's campsite, where they just got a few of these comics which were distributed, and they had them on like a rotating stand. So I used to go in, spend my pocket money just picking one of these to go and read in the caravan. Yeah. So that's how it started. But then they started a new Fantastic Four British strip, which was essentially, it was reprinting the origin story, and then they would break that up into sort of more serialized things, and then there would be a second strip, which I think was a more up to date Fantastic Four story, and then
so would they change the plot lines at all for the UK market, or was it very much a straight?
Yeah, no, they didn't change the stories, but they certainly changed. They anglicised a lot of the spellings. And probably the main job of the editor of Marvel UK, which obviously originally was Des Skin, who was the man also responsible for Starburst magazine,
and Doctor Who magazine.
Yeah, Doctor Who magazine as well, was to anglicise a lot of the spellings. So you'd see really quite badly done. I'll have to find some of these and scan them in so you can see them, Dave. Because they literally look like they've been Tipp-X'd out and written in bad writing over certain words.
Just add the U certain places.
Yeah, or get rid of Yes, exactly. Neighbour. Yeah, it was that sort of thing. So that's what you get. But the advantage of that as well was because they used to break them up into smaller chunks, because a lot of these comics were weekly as opposed to monthly. I don't think they started in monthly ones till much later on. These were weekly. So the idea of these serialized stories worked much better, much more like, Doctor Who or any of the TV series, But
they weren't averse to recycling stuff, because I seem to remember watching a documentary about the strip act part of the Doctor Who magazine, and they were talking about how they would recycle old John Pertwee stories and just sort of draw in Tom Baker over the top of them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's going back to like TV21 and things like that, a lot of the British titles. But but the other advantage of it was because there would be small chunks, and these comics were made up of small chunks of story, they would put backup strips in there. So through that, you would meet other characters that you wouldn't ordinarily have read. It's like, I know, Rocket Raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy, the new film that's about to come out. Yeah. And he's just about to get his first comic for the first time because of the movie. but I
Right.
first saw him in a backup strip in Star Wars comic in Britain.
Oh.
So
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that Guardians of the Galaxy, that was an older comic book that kind of lay fallow for a while and kind of got resurrected for the new generation here.
yeah.
So you mentioned before about the supervillain team up. This whole, I mean, the Avengers is huge. So that's not necessarily a particularly new idea to get superheroes and put them together in a story. Are there sort of ones that are held up above all the others? Is Avengers like the ultimate sort of matchup, or are there others that are as good?
It's probably the X-Men, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah. Of course, Fantastic Four, but I wouldn't really call that a team-up. Back in the day, there used to be a Spider-Man team-up book and a Thing team-up book, Marvel 2-in-1, and I can't remember what Spider-Man's was called. But yeah, it would be...
that was Marvel Team Up, wasn't it? Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah, Marvel team-up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Thing was 2-in-1. Yeah, it would be the Thing and, I don't know, Iron Man, or the Thing and the Silver Surfer, or Spider-Man and, Kitty Pryde. They kept running into each other in the world.
Well, this is another thing with the Marvel DC, because DC are currently, they're planning the Justice League. Justice League of America, the JLA, is essentially DC's Avengers. I don't know which one came first. Justice Society of America was first, wasn't it, Dave?
Yeah, that was from the Silver Age. The earlier ones. It was the Jay Garrick Flash and the older Kal-El with just an L instead of an EL. The World War II superheroes.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that's new to films, is this idea of the crossovers. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the equivalent of I suppose in some respects in the UK, like a James Bond crossing over with Dan Dare or something. It's quite, it's a brilliant idea in theory. Whether it works or not is another matter. But to see these crossovers happening in the films is quite nice. I mean, I do remember having little sparks of excitement when you'd be reading a comic for a period of time, and then all of a sudden a character from another comic that you were also reading started appearing in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you get the same effect. My daughter's at the moment, she's catching up on a load of old cartoons, like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Oh, yeah.
And she loves those. She loves those because, it'll be carrying on, and then all of a sudden one of the X-Men will turn up. Wolverine suddenly turns up with a Cockney accent and things like that. It's really great. But it's quite exciting to suddenly see these characters that you've read separately working together. It's quite odd. And the Avengers as a movie was, for me, it was quite odd, actually, to have seen those Iron Man movies going along and then to have him suddenly interacting with all the other characters was quite something.
The Marvel Cinematic Experiment, where they're building a whole universe, I don't know that this has ever been done. To have this many...
they put a lot of thought into it.
You can tell it's a plan because, Iron Man, the Hulk, Thor, Captain America, and then, even lesser characters like Black Widow. And I'm not sure if this is... I'm not sure. I'm going to sound completely continental. Do you all have Netflix?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's going to be the Marvel Netflix shows where they're going to have Daredevil, Jennifer Jones,
Iron Fist. Iron Fist going to be one.
Yeah, Iron Fist and Power Man, and
There's
then
talk of an X-Men series as well, isn't there?
Is there?
Yeah, I was reading on the Starbest website.
Really?
They're talking about it. Yeah.
I don't know what they're on about.
Well, that's not going to go with the rest of the continuity though, because Marvel doesn't have the rights to the X-Men.
No.
Yeah, that seems strange to me.
Yeah. Sony has Spider-Man and Fox as the X-Men.
Ah, so that's
right,
why
isn't it?
Spider-Man
Because-
won't ever end up in the Avengers.
Exactly.
Because he does in
Because,
the comic books, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because Quicksilver's in the new X-Men movie, but he's also going to be in Avengers 2 as a different version. Isn't he?
Quicksilver's a weird character because he's Magneto's son, but he was also an Avenger. So I think they split the rights right down the middle.
And of course, we've got the big X-Men movie coming out now. Mm-hmm. Which, Simon, before we started recording, you were telling me you got a piece of ephemera that links back to that.
Well, this is it. And then as I was growing up, I was reading all the Marvel UK titles, and then you would start getting a bit choosy and thinking, I want to see this in colour. So you'd start seeking out the American issues, and they would 1980 for 15 pence from my local corner shop. I bought issue 1 of Days of Future Past, and I went into my cupboard yesterday and found it, and I've got it here in front of me. So I'm going to scan that in for Mark to put online.
Sweet.
And I don't know whether it makes it worth more. You'd think it would, wouldn't you? Because it's literally got the 15 pence emblazoned on the front, properly printed. So they obviously did a print run for the UK.
That was a lot of money back then.
Because I know the earlier ones, I'm fairly sure they just imported them across and then people stuck stickers on them. But these have literally got 15 pence in big letters on the stunt on the front of the cover. So
Yeah, that was from that run, that Claremont Byrne run of the X-Men.
Gorgeous.
Talk about a high watermark. That whole era from Dark Phoenix. That's what got me into comic books. That Dark Phoenix saga.
Yep, we've got some of those as well. Yeah,
it's like.
So do you tend to generally get team-ups of someone who's a writer and then someone who's an artist, or do you get like uber-talented people who are great artists but they can also write the storylines really well as well, or how does that normally pan out?
You don't get a lot of solo art. John Byrne was one of the rare exceptions where he was a good writer and a fantastic artist. But usually they're teams.
Yeah.
Alan Davis is another one. Anyone who knows me knows I'm an absolute Alan Davis fanboy.
Yeah. You liked Excalibur, didn't you?
Oh, I adore Excalibur. Yeah. The first one, that is. Yeah. But again, that was the other interesting thing from this side of the Atlantic, was that you started getting British writers like Alan Moore, and the artists like Alan Davis and Brian Bolland, and who else? A lot of the ones who were involved in the Doctor Who comic started getting involved in the American comics, and it was just for my side of things, because I was trying to be an artist as well, getting into comic art. Was seeing the way we drew things was slightly different, very slightly different. Alan Davis's work is extremely precise, and that probably that goes back to because he started working sort of 2000 AD and things like that. I mean, that's probably about the only comic we've given you, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah.
I don't know of anything else that's kind of
the crossover seems to be very much one direction.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, don't give them One Direction, please.
No, you can keep them, please do. But no, there is a sort of tradition, isn't there, in Britain for... I mean, growing up as a kid, maybe this is because I wasn't as well-read as you two, but in the UK, there's very much a tradition back in the sort of 70s and 80s of comics for kids were very much, I guess in America you call them the funnies. They're kind of comic characters and little sort of comedy strips rather than superheroes as such. The nearest thing we had to that for quite a while was Dan Dare, which was a sort of an action hero. And then in the 70s, we then got 2000 AD, which took it on to a totally different level. I'm sure Simon's got a thing or two to say about 2000 AD.
In what way?
Well, I mean, is it a comic that really inspired you?
Do you know, it
made
wasn't.
you want to be an artist?
I have to be honest and say no, it wasn't.
Oh, really?
It wasn't. I was quite a late starter with 2000 AD.
You're a late developer.
When I started, when I went to college in about 1989-90, I suddenly got together with a load of... It was odd for me because I'd grew up in quite a small Cornwall town, where my only link with comics was literally going down to the newsagent and picking them up, and I was the only person who read them. I was literally the only person I knew who read comics.
Wow.
And when I went to college, and also being one of the few people at school who were good at drawing, so going to college was a double whammy. Suddenly being there with loads of other people who could draw as well as you, if not better, but also that they were into their comics. And my God, you know, they lived near Truro, and Truro had a comic shop. I'd never been to a comic shop. The only stuff I ever found was in a normal newsagent, so I'd always have to look down the bottom shelf because that's where all the kids' stuff was, and pick up the comics and go home, and I had to take what I got. I couldn't. I don't know if it's a... Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but certainly growing up in the UK, comics were looked on as children's entertainment.
Well,
whereas I get the impression in the US that it's a bit more
there's literally
across the board.
The distinguishing thing between America and the UK is that we call them comics and they call them comic books.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there is an instant respect and treating it like literature from the start in America, which there isn't here.
And of course, you've got your graphic novel as well, which is perhaps getting us
That's
close to being pretentious, but
Well, that's when you don't want to be caught reading comics, but you can read a graphic novel. So.
Yeah, we're back to Harry Potter with adult covers. It's just it's smoke and mirrors, isn't it?
When I was a kid, there was a stigma of comics were a childish.
Oh right, okay.
But now it's getting more accepted, and probably the movies have been very helpful in that because you just saw a comic book movie. Everybody who just made the number one movie.
But it's not as a real variation in types of comic as well. So you've got sort of superheroes that we've been focusing on, but there's stuff like The Walking Dead, which is huge now. So stuff with very adult themes. And it's seen probably more nowadays as a legitimate art form, whereas perhaps it might have been looked down upon a bit more in the sort of 80s and 70s, do you think?
Yeah, I'd say that. It's gotten some legitimacy. And there's also been more mature titles that have come out, like The Walking Dead. So yeah, that's helped push things along.
I mean, I don't know whether Dave would agree. If you go back to sort of late 60s, early 70s, when comics went underground, you had titles by who wrote Fritz the Cat?
Arcrum.
Yeah, and stuff like that. Adult titles, comics. As people had grown up with comics, but decided to start drawing adult subject matter. But that stayed underground, and it was very much cottage industry.
Yeah,
these things going out, and it's that same old thing of where all of a sudden somebody's working on those will get a proper job. And that sort of influence starts coming in. And that's where you get that crossover and you get things, certainly in the UK, certainly about 2000 AD started getting a little bit like that. And people from that, like Alan Moore, you know what he's like. He starts to want to do things his way. And it starts to bleed through into the mainstream.
Well, and you get creator comics, people who, Spawn is one of those where it was creator owned. So he could basically do whatever he wanted to with it. And that got more mature. That was in that high flying 90s era where everything went, anything goes.
Was that, what am I thinking, Rob Liefeld? No.
Yeah. No, not Rob Liefeld.
Who was it? Somebody broke away from Marvel, didn't they? Because they didn't like the way it was going.
Yeah, it was
Lee? No, Jim Lee?
Todd McFarlane.
Todd McFarlane.
Yeah, he had a really good Spider-Man run, as I recall.
Gorgeous.
But,
the thing with me is I just looked at a lot of the artwork. Sometimes I didn't even read the stories. I just looked at the artwork. So beautiful.
Yeah, he had a gorgeous style.
Yeah.
He has a gorgeous style. He's still alive.
Yeah. But again, we can go back to the Doctor Who comics because when they first started, we had Dave Gibbons.
Yeah.
From that first, because of course that was Marvel UK again.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it seems like a much more mainstream media now. You don't get the impression that people when they walk into a store and they buy a comic book, they have to kind of like slide it inside their copy of the TV Times or whatever. They don't. There's not that kind of stigma attached to it anymore.
No, not as much.
And where do you think you can see that? I mean, Avengers was huge, and then you've got these other movies that are sort of coming on now. Can you see it just completely dominating the box office now for quite a few years to come? Or I suppose it's like a lot of things, they kind of have their moment and they kind of die away again. Yeah.
Well, one thing the Marvel Universe is doing is I've heard they have everything's planned out till 2028. I mean, it's they've got a whole plan, but
that's forward planning.
That is forward planning, but they're being smart about it. They're building it. I mean, each movie is like a piece of this huge story that we're not seeing the entire story of. So it's like I say, you don't make $500 million at the box office just by getting the quote unquote comic book geeks. I mean, it is breaking through into the main.
Well, that's what impressed me about the Avengers movie was because I wasn't really steeped in the history of it. I wasn't really sure whether I was going to enjoy it as much as someone like Simon who had grown up with it. But I think they got that balance just right of having all the sort of little references for the guys who really knew their stuff, but not at the expense of somebody walking into the theatre who'd never seen an Avengers comic book before. So I think the balance, it's very easy to go too far in one direction.
Right.
You don't want to upset your hardcore fans, but on the other hand, you don't want to make it completely impenetrable for somebody who's walking in for the first time. And I think they've judged that really well.
Well, this past Captain America movie, they did a great job in doing the Winter Soldier, where, the people who had read the comics, they knew, oh, Winter Soldier, they're so good. But if you didn't know it, they laid it out perfectly. You knew all you needed to know. That story made complete sense. It was really, it's a fine line in in storytelling, because you've got a hardcore audience and you've got an audience that, you need the bigger audience, so you can't completely exclude them, but you still got to throw a bone to the old.
I was going to say, I haven't seen that, but I've heard it described as a thriller as opposed to a
it is
movie.
It is a spy/conspiracy film, more than a superhero movie. And
yet I've heard, in much the same way, a criticism of the last Dark Knight film is that is a crime movie and it isn't a superhero movie. And you could take Batman out of it and it would still be a crime movie. But I've not seen that. But
they did an interesting choice in that movie, whereas they had an old broken down Batman. So that was an interesting choice, I thought.
I mean, you've got the whole thing with the Superman versus Batman movie that's in the works at the moment. Maybe it's me, but I just get the impression they've kind of cobbled it together. They just thought, oh, that'd be a good idea, rather than really kind of thinking it through.
Well, I think they're trying to replicate the Avengers, but they're trying to do it much quicker than Marvel did, and I'm not sure if that's going to.
There's a danger there of rushing it and then coming out with something that's not.
Do you know what? I don't think Marvel are worried, because they've put the release date of Captain America 3 the same day as Superman versus Batman. And for me, Captain America was, he wasn't one of the real. He's not the Spider-Mans. He's not the Hulk. He was he was kind of a middle ground character, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was kind of on the Iron Man level. I always call it, has my mom ever heard of this character? Yeah. Spider-Man, Superman, sure. Captain America, maybe. Iron Man, no, probably not.
Of course, they made a sop to the UK by having Captain Britain. Do you think he's ever going to make it into one of the movies?
Oh, I would love it. I would love it. He is a brilliant character. Again, Chris Claremont created him, didn't he? Who's the X-Men creator. Yeah.
He's Defender of the Multiverse. Come on.
Yeah. Well, as far as I'm aware, he was kind of created as some kind of figurehead of Marvel UK to kind of put them on the map, to get the crossover. And I think the first story was a team up with Spider-Man, wasn't it?
That would be a good way to launch him.
Yeah.
That was a John Byrne strip, actually. John Byrne drawn, if I remember rightly.
So with Captain Britain, is it the same deal as Captain America? He's been injected with this super serum and then he's...
No.
No? Oh,
no. Okay. Captain Britain, I think he's involved with Merlin. I think it was
Obviously.
Merlin gave him his... I think he's a descendant of King Arthur or something like that.
Yeah,
so
I think it's something like that.
He was a playboy. He was a rich playboy, rich parents. And
King Arthur was?
No.
He had a mansion and everything.
I seem to remember he did something like he had some massive car crash and then went to Stonehenge, found himself at Stonehenge and had this vision appear to him of Merlin, who gave him power.
Sweet.
But there's been all manner of things with him since then. I think he got completely destroyed. He had a run where he was completely, quite literally disintegrated. And Merlin put him back together again and cast him out, and that's where it got all involved with the multiverse and things like that. And then there was a big crossover with the X-Men, which is where Excalibur, as in X in Excalibur.
Get it?
Came in.
Oh, I see what they did there.
But that was a great title. It was,
absolutely
funny, wasn't it? Really funny.
It was much more lighthearted because the X-Men at that time were getting very heavy, and just the Excalibur was very much a lighthearted. It could breathe. It had more air to it. It felt like, and Nightcrawler's one of my favorite characters. So.
Oh, my favorite. Honestly, my favorite superhero. There you go.
Oh, did you know he came back?
Did he?
He's been resurrected. He did die, but he's back now. It was a whole
You can do
thing.
anything in comics.
Oh yeah, they actually went back to heaven to get him. So
Wowzers.
he was dead with a capital D, but he's back now.
Well, I never.
So with the Days of Future Past, I don't know how. I'm assuming it's going to be pretty faithful to the original comic book, because that was. I don't know whether they meant to do it or whether it was just like a subconscious thing, but that was based on an old Doctor Who, wasn't it, Simon?
What was Days of Future Past?
Days of Future Past, yeah.
Are you talking about Day of the Daleks?
Yes.
Really?
In much the
I'm
same-
so sorry, Dave, because when Ben hears this, he's going to bore you rigid about it.
We're always looking for things to talk about. That'll be good.
It isn't that faithful, to be honest.
Okay.
The original
Yeah.
comic, it's some little changes because Wolverine has become such a central character to the X-Men, certainly in the movie form. In the original comic, it was quite a small character called Kitty Pryde, who I think was she Sprite or Shadowcat at that time. I think
She wasn't
still-
Shadowcat yet.
No,
she
she was
might
quite
have-
a new X-Man, wasn't she? Very young.
She had just joined
And-
5 issues before that, I believe.
That's right. Yeah. So they, as a team, she was still very fresh to them, so they still weren't quite sure about her. And what they did was in the future, a character who was the daughter of Phoenix, I think.
Yeah,
who got
Rachel
s-
Grant.
Yeah, she had very far-reaching powers, and she was able to pass her consciousness of the old Kitty Pryde into the young Kitty Pryde to warn the people in the past about what's about to happen.
Yeah, her
That
character
sounds
was
really complex.
her character was picked because she was so young and hadn't had time to build mental defenses against this sort of thing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at an old reprint of this actual story. The present was 1980. The future was 2013. Just throw that out.
Oh,
Just-
wow.
Just throwing that out there.
And of course, in the film, they've changed it to Wolverine, so Wolverine's
Yeah.
the one that gets transferred back.
Which makes sense because Kitty Pryde was in X-Men 3, which is a terrible movie,
That
by the
was
way.
pretty bad, yeah.
Well, I was
I
so
don't know
excited.
much about comics, but
And
that-
at the
that's
end of
kind of
X-Men
stuff.
2, they were going to do Dark Phoenix. I was so stoked because X-Men 2 is a really good film. And at the end, they were hinting at Phoenix, and I was like, okay, and they completely screwed it up. I was so angry.
I have to say, I haven't seen X-Men First Class, so I don't know whether that kind of
it's great.
put them back on track again. Or
Yeah,
It's
that's a
lovely,
really good movie.
actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good film. It's a great film. And of course, that's the two, X-Men First Class and up to X-Men 2. There's the big crossover in the new film.
Yeah, I'm thinking they're just going to ignore X-Men 3 entirely because it really looks like it's an offshoot from X-Men 2, and which is fine with me.
Well, as far as they'll change timelines, won't they? So it doesn't have to happen.
Oh, cool.
Do we still get Vinnie Jones though, don't we? Do we still get Vinnie Jones
Oh, God.
as Juggernaut?
Oh, dear.
Do we?
I don't know. He was in
We'll
X-Men
find out.
3, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was probably the best part of X-Men 3.
Wow. That speaks volumes.
He
I
was a
thought
big dude who ran through walls correctly.
Didn't you like Kelsey Grammer's Beast?
I buy the character, but I just don't buy the. If he would just voice over a beast, that would be fine.
Yeah. So but no, it's very odd. It's like I said to you before the podcast, Mark, to find that copy of Days of Future Past kind of pulls everything together for me. Personally, my experience with Marvel Comics, that pulls it all together because obviously I bought that in a newsagent in the corner store for 15p. That's now going to be a massive movie. All of a sudden, it's all very mainstream, all the comics. And it's strange for it all to be out there for everyone to know about, which is really odd because it was very much my thing. Growing up in that small town, it's quite odd.
Yeah. Do you feel like everybody's catching up finally?
Well, I'm catching up now because I kind of went away from comics for a bit and I come back to it, and then I go away and then I come back. But I'm still I'd still love to draw in comics. I'd love to. But
Well, you are a graphic artist, aren't you?
I am.
And your artwork can be found in previously
Starburst.
mentioned Starburst magazine.
Every month, yes, yes. I do J.R. Southall's column. I do the illustration to
Beg your
go with it.
pardon?
Yeah,
You do JR's column.
I do. Oh,
It's a family magazine.
No, but I'd love.
So if you get the call from Marvel, would you pack in Starburst and do a few Spider-Man strips?
Too rude to say. But
That'd be a yes.
We were talking about Star Wars, weren't we? Because Star Wars is about to come back to Marvel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it? I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It's coming about. Is it still with Dark Horse at the moment, isn't it? It's gone with Dark Horse for. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit unfair, really, because after the films packed up, the first 3 films, and it ran for a little while on Marvel, then Dark Horse picked it up and did some really interesting things with it. And now they're starting the films up again, and it looks like they're going to be good. Marvel have got it again.
Oh, because of Disney.
Yes. Of course it is. Of course it is. That's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, it is now.
Missed the obvious.
I gotta say,
so poor Dark Horse, they get it during the pretty crappy prequels, and then Disney pick it back up again when it's all tickety-boo and looking quite promising.
Yes, absolutely.
It's new and shiny again. Yay. And the Marvel Star Wars run got me through a very dark time because, kids, you may not be aware of this, but there were 4 years between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
And that kept the line alive back before the internet. I want more Star Wars.
My friend had the Star Wars annual, and there was a comic strip, something about it. Was it the Crimson
Forever?
I can't remember now.
The Crimson Forever. It was drawn by, was it Al Williamson?
Mm-hmm. I remember reading that.
That was quite a good story, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't it? Didn't it play with flashbacks? Because Han Solo was still frozen, wasn't he? So they went.
Yeah.
We're going back a long time now.
Yeah, no, I remember that one.
Yeah,
but it was just filling that gap, wasn't it, between the original movie and then The Empire Strikes Back coming out? Because I'm sure all the kids had their own ideas on how the story was going to progress from the first film.
Well, and even more between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, because if you remember, The Empire Strikes Back leaves on a cliffhanger for 4 years.
I'll tell you what I have got, though, Dave, ignoring the fact we're on a podcast, and I don't know whether these were ever published. Oh, hang on, no, I was told recently they were published in America in a like a collected comics thing. But there were 2 or 3 issues of Star Wars Monthly, which was obviously a British reprint of a lot of the Star Wars stuff, but they started doing a few homegrown ones. And there's a couple written by Alan Moore with kind of British artwork and stuff in them.
Really?
Which are really quite odd. Yeah.
I have not seen that.
No, I think a friend of mine said they're in some kind of collected comics, some trade paperback somewhere, but they're not. Yeah. So I'll scan some of those in because it's a lovely little crossover.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
And part of me thinks that George Lucas is such a control freak that he would be very meticulous about what he allows them to use or not use in the comic books. And then another part of me thinks, well, no, he's also a businessman as well, and he seems very happy to make as much money out of as many various things as he can out of that trademark. So
well, he basically made his nut on merchandising. So
he did, and to be honest, he said, "Yeah, you're free to go and do what you like with it, but don't expect me to follow the continuity in the films." That's what he said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's fair enough.
There's canon, and this is what you're doing.
Oh, dear. Dave, I don't know whether you found the same things. Did you carry on reading the Star Wars comic after they finished the first film? You did, didn't you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you have any issues with some of the artists and what they did with some of the characters and the ships and the guns and things like that? Yeah,
well, there was one artist, Carmine Infantiago. I might be massacring his name.
Yeah, I felt terrible recently because, I'll tell you in a minute. Go on.
Yeah, I was never able to get into his art. His characters always look like their chins were drawn with T-squares. I mean, it was very angular. But I don't know. I think I knew to take it with a grain of salt. Because I figured it's one of those things where, kind of like in the current Spider-Man run, it's like, when the movie comes out, everything's going to be back to status quo and go.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, though. Carmine Infantino, his name was.
Yeah.
And I absolutely hated his artwork. Really hated it. And I particularly hated the fact that his guns were all blocky. And the Millennium Falcon looked like, those toys for small kids of Star Wars characters. They do a Han Solo and Chewbacca. Mm-hmm. And the Millennium Falcon looks really squat. It's almost like, Duplo.
Is it kind of like the Duplo to the Lego?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what all his ships were like. I hated it. And I looked him up to see whether he's still working, and he died last year.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you feel bad now,
I
Simon.
feel terrible.
Well, you weren't saying anything about him as a person. So.
No, I wasn't.
He was
And actually, he's if you look him up on Wikipedia, he's absolutely worshipped in the comic world. I'm trying to think. He did something in particular. He invented one particular character, I think, but I can't remember now. But no, I did take issue with that because I just thought, well, it's all there. Star Wars is Star Wars, so it should just be how it is on the screen, surely.
There's artistic license, I suppose.
There is, yeah. I mean, some people can get away with it. When you read the Doctor Who strips, I was going on about that one strip, Junkyard Demon, in the Tom Baker era.
Yeah.
I adore that strip. I'm trying to remember.
It's a bit of a fan favourite, isn't it?
It is. They've all got big boots and things, but yeah.
So if you two guys, for someone like me who's a complete ignoramus to the whole world of comic books, if you wanted to try and get me interested in comic books, would there be like a particular storyline that you would try and recommend to me to get me hooked on it, or would there be a particular franchise that you feel would be a good introduction to comics? Or is it too sort of spread out? Is there so much variety that it's very much down to the person as to what they would?
Yeah, I can give you one example. Because I always think the best way to get into something is to almost have like a little reference point, even if it's just a writer or an artist that you've seen before. I've recently been reading the latest run of Wolverine.
Okay.
Because it's written by Paul Cornell.
Ah, right. Okay. Who's
So and
Doctor Who.
for me, it was a big thing because it's Paul Cornell and the artwork's by Alan Davis, who again say is my favourite. So that is, I think, is about a 10-issue run.
Okay.
Which I can lend you. Oh no, 6 parts. It's a 6-parter, and it's called Killable, and it's about what happens to Wolverine when he gets his mutant healing power taken away. So all of a sudden he's mortal.
Okay.
And has to be careful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Part of Wolverine's charm is just running into the machine gun stream and taking it. And he can't do that now.
But funny you saying about the crossover thing, though. When you read that, you'll see certain characters come in and out of it, which are from other comics, and then you can refer to that and think, oh, I'll start reading that. That's exactly how it worked for me anyway.
I tell you the other thing, I don't know if it's another cultural thing, whether you guys got it in America, but growing up in the 70s and 80s as a young lad, we used to get these like little mini comic books. They were Commando comic books, and it was all like World War II stories with, quite sort of gritty stories of, commandos infiltrating German territory, and you'd have all these sort of like stylized sort of, blam and all that kind of stuff across the page. Did you get those, or was that not really something that you guys got over there?
Well, there were certain comic titles. Sergeant Rock was one of them, which I think was DC actually. But we didn't have strips as far as that goes. There were a couple of dedicated books to that, but they were never the. I don't know it ever crossed into the mainstream universe.
Mm-hmm. It's just occurred to me of how the comics behaved during the wartime. It's kind of filtered through, both in the UK and
kind of propaganda,
and
wasn't it? Really,
it was
in many respects.
Well, if you think about the UK, the wartime comics, as you say, were the funnies. They were the ones that kind of got that's how Britain got through the war, was stiff upper lip and let's have a laugh about it. And I think they were very popular then, because it wasn't until about the 1950s that titles like The Eagle started up, with things like Dan Dare started up. But again, there was that same kind of almost militaristic, very, stiff upper lip kind of characters were carried through. And it wasn't until the 2000 AD time that things started getting a bit more sketchy and a bit more random. And I think I'm right, Dave, that with America it was much the same things. Like you say, you had Sergeant Rock. Even Nick Fury started, didn't he, as being kind of like a wartime strip after the event.
Yeah, it was Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos.
That's right.
Nick Fury's always an odd duck because he apparently found a fountain of youth kind of formula. That's why he's still viable today.
That was convenient.
It was convenient. And at some point, he turned into Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool.
How have they explained that in the comics? Because he's black in the comics, isn't he?
Yeah, he started in the Ultimate line. There's two comic lines in the Marvel Universe. There's the main Marvel Universe, and there's this offshoot called the Ultimate line, where they just reimagined everything. So Spider-Man was a 16-year-old kid again, who did the website for the Daily Planet and that sort of thing. And in that
website, sorry,
in that universe, they actually based Nick Fury off of Samuel L. Jackson, in the hopes that if they ever made a movie, they could cast Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury.
And he's a noted comic book fan, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And he was kind of shocked when he found that out, but he was game for it, and everything went well. And I actually missed that he's actually in the mainstream Marvel universe now, and I kind of missed how they did that. I didn't quite catch how they transformed him, or if I actually don't think he's the same character. I think he's another character named Nick Fury. I don't know. It's all very comic booky.
What did you guys make of Unbreakable? Because Samuel L. Jackson's the bad guy in that, isn't he?
That was an interesting take on the superhero genre.
I really liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies that M. Night Shyamalan has done.
Yeah, it kind of went off the boil for me after that. But,
yeah, which is kind of faint praise. But
is it one you're familiar with, Simon?
I've not watched it since I saw it at the cinema when it first came out. I quite liked it. I thought it was over long. That's all I remember. I just remember it being a very long film.
It was an interesting take on what you would do if you found out you had superpowers. You wouldn't put on spandex. You might just put on a hoodie.
Or a poncho.
Well, that was one of the most interesting strips in a funny way. It was one of the most interesting strips in 2000 AD was a character called Zenith. You ever heard of that?
Okay.
And it was kind of treating... I can't remember who the writer was. Was it Alan Moore? It was someone like that. I know Steve Yale did the artwork. I always remember the artist, never the writer. That's rubbish, isn't it? And it was, if there was a superhero in real life and he ended up being sponsored and doing TV work and doing celebrity stuff and doing advertising and things like that, really cynical, you know.
Yeah. But kind of realistic. Really,
yeah, absolutely satirical. That's a good one to look out, actually, Mark, as far as British strips are concerned. Zenith. Cool. I think it was about 3 runs of it, and it was really good, quite funny, but very true to life in a lot of ways as well. And of course, you know, the other big 2000 AD one was Judge Dredd, of course.
I remember picking up a few issues of 2000 AD in the 90s and being really blown away by the artwork. I mean, I wouldn't know who the artists were, but it had got to the point where it's almost like you had see, I don't know all the characters as well as you guys, but the Judge Death, is it?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a strip with him in it, and the artwork is almost like some kind of avant-garde painting. It's amazing. It's taking up the whole page as well. It's just massive slabs of artwork with just like the odd little dialogue box thrown in on the odd page, and it's quite a jaw-dropping experience to read it.
2000 AD became a bit of a weird animal because in the early days it was on like cheap paper, sort of about 77 when it first started, and it did things like it brought Dan Dare back and kind of modernised him a bit, and then had Judge Dredd and this sort of thing. And then later on in sort of the late 90s and the early 2000s, it went on glossy paper and was beautifully printed. And
do you feel it lost some of its character by doing that?
The stories just seemed really, what's the word, when they're kind of elongated to, there's probably the right word for it, if something becomes too stretched out. Not much seemed to happen in each in episode before the next one.
Going back to sort of Doctor Who references, like a Pertwee story.
Yeah. It was an awful, the emphasis on the artwork almost became too strong, and because all of a sudden they had this beautifully printed, full colour, glossy pages type thing. I think that sort of came with artists like Simon Bisley when he got involved, because he came in and did a run of Slain, and his artwork was all of a sudden had gone from just being normal pen and ink line work with a bit of colouring here and there. All of a sudden it was like full colour oil painting type or acrylic type stuff that he managed to chuck out at incredible speed, but incredible quality as well. And all of a sudden the emphasis on the artwork was there, which meant that they would give the artist full rein to just take their time over a story. And the story suffered in big ways, as far as I was concerned. But I was never really a 2000 AD fan. For some reason, I never took to it in the same way as Marvel. But then when I wanted to be an artist, and I went to college, I suddenly realised that the big thing for British artists
Yeah.
and for writers as well is that 2000 AD is basically the test bed. If you want to you want to break America, you do it through 2000 AD.
Yeah.
To go straight from just drawing and then getting picked up by someone like DC or Marvel in the UK is incredibly difficult. But the way you get noticed is by going through the British publications.
So it's like a portfolio for aspiring
And that
artists.
was the only reason I started buying 2000 AD was literally to try and get myself up to speed on working to that sort of level. And then I went to a convention and got my stuff looked at by a few people and decided that I didn't want to work for them. And then I disappeared from comics altogether for about 10, 15 years. And then I've just fairly recently come back to it again through meeting some brilliant people, some brilliant, enthusiastic and positive people, because what I got at this convention was an incredible amount of negativity. And I just thought, I'm not sure I want to be involved in this. But
So have you got anything in the pipeline that you can tell us about, or is it all under wraps for the moment?
I've just done work on a music-related project, but I'm not saying any more than that.
Okay.
And
because you're also involved in Cygnus Alpha, aren't you? Which is a fanzine which has got some pretty impressive artwork.
Yeah, that's really good. That was a fanzine that was run back in the 1980s that basically covered the Peter Davison era, possibly into the Colin Bakers as well, and then disappeared again as people grew up, went off to university, got jobs. And then last year when we organised the Phonicon event, local to Exeter, where we all live, by chance, Lee, the guy I organised it with, got in contact with one of the guys who used to run Cygnus Alpha back in the day, which had quite a good reputation amongst all the fanzines.
They had some pretty notable writers.
It did, yeah. Paul Cornell wrote for it, and Gary Russell, who've both been involved in the TV series now since then. And we just thought, well, let's put together an issue just for the event that people can buy on the day. And then we decided to carry it on. And I don't think people realise what an incredible amount of work it is to do.
Yeah.
Because I'm still I've done issue 13, and now I'm waiting to do issue 14, and I've realised that I just do not get time to do it. So it really does depend on whether you've got a load of spare time or whether you've got a lot of good people around you. Because now it's a bit of a team effort now. So there is another one in the pipeline.
Oh, that's good.
And there are some brilliant. And weirdly, we've got an interview with Paul Cornell about his Wolverine and about his new book in the new issue.
It's kind of come full circle.
Exactly.
So is there a website that we can point people towards if they want to check out Cygnus Alpha?
Probably the best thing is a Facebook group or the Facebook page. So if you stick Cygnus Alpha into the search bar in Facebook, you'll find us.
Excellent. And Dave, seeing as we're getting plugs in, I think we should definitely give a mention to the Tower of Technobabble.
Oh, thank you. We're actually going for a Guinness Book of World Records at the end of the month.
Yes, this is huge.
Yeah. We're going to do it publicly, so we're going to either succeed or fail in the public eye. Yeah.
Your co-host Ben seems to keep adding on hours each time you're talking about how long you're going to run for. I think you need to rein him in a bit.
Yeah, well, he can talk as long as he wants to, but I think we're going to cut out about 40 hours. The record is 36 and some change, so we're aiming for 40.
So you guys are going to be at is it a convention? Or
it's called Wonderfest. It's basically a convention for special effects and modeling, which is really cool. They don't have a lot of big, you can't come see Matt Smith or something, but you can come see people who have worked in the industry and see some of their work and see some...
Quite often you find they're more interesting than the people in front of the screen.
Well, and you're not going to have to pay $50 to have your picture taken.
Well, there is that as well,
But it's, I don't really care for the big Comic-Con type conventions. This is much more, it's going to be fun and it's going to be a lot of stuff going on, but it's not going to be, they're not going to be putting people in with crowbars trying to get as much money as they can. So
you're going to be doing trying to break the world record for the longest ever webcast, is that right?
Longest ever live webcast. So we're going to have a table there. We're trying to figure out a way to get Towerbot because he's our breakout star, of course. So
yeah,
he's the Spock to our Kirk.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the ladies love the Tower Bot. But
So is there a web page that you're working on so people can tune in, or is it better to go through the Tower of Technobabble webpage?
Yeah, it's going to be www.toweroftechnobabble.com, and then at the top we'll have a link to the page you can stream, and we'll have. We're actually working out the technical details right now, but
I believe if you're in the sort of Louisville area, you could potentially help out with this world record-breaking attempt. Is that right?
That's right. We'll be interviewing people there. Come, talk to us. We have 40 hours to fill.
And I believe you need people to act as witnesses as well?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Talking 40 hours isn't going to be the problem, because we seem not to have that kind of a problem. But the logistics of the thing is going to be the tricky part. We need people to watch us do it, to say that we did it and sign their name to that effect. We have to have 2 witnesses at all time in 4-hour shifts. So we're basically looking for 20 people to look at us.
So if you're in the Louisville area and you feel like you could help out, then just head on over to. Is there a good way to contact you? I guess you can probably get in touch through the Tower of Technobabble webpage.
Yeah, the best email address would be towergram@gmail.com. And if you can help us out with that, or we're also looking for sponsors to help us out with some of the financial costs. So anything you can do to help, we would be greatly appreciative.
Well, I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Oh, you'll hear it.
Is there going to be a huge vat of whiskey or something to keep you going through the early hours?
No, we're thinking water and caffeine. I think liquor might. It might be good for the hour 20, but hour 27 would be not good.
I wish you all the very best of luck with that, Dave.
Thank you very much.
And as is customary on the show, we like to ask our guests for recommendations. So it doesn't have to necessarily be comic book related, but if there's something that you guys have that you'd like to recommend to our listeners to check out that you think would be of interest, and I can set the ball rolling while you guys have a bit of a think. Certainly recently, music-wise, Pixies, who were a huge band for me back in my teens, first band I ever saw live, still one of the best gigs I've ever been to. They've just released a new album for the first time in decades.
Oh, cool.
And it's pretty decent. They can still rock. So that's worth checking out. Also, TV-wise, I'm guessing you guys are getting it pretty much simultaneously. The TV version of Fargo.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
I've seen the trailers for it.
Yeah, it's very good. It inhabits the same sort of area that the Fargo movie came from. There's little sort of subtle winks to the original movie.
Oh, geez, so it's pretty cold up there, eh?
Yeah. So I'd certainly recommend that. It's a really the first episode. Me and my wife watched it, and it's like an hour and a half long. And she asked me, are you sure this is a series? Because they're packing a hell of a lot into the first episode. But it's a really good show. The ones I've seen so far, I've seen the first couple of episodes, so I'd certainly recommend watching that. And also the obligatory Game of Thrones. If you guys are up to speed on that. Season 4 is currently showing in the UK on Sky, and it's pretty amazing stuff. I won't spoil it for anyone, but it's worth watching, definitely.
Characters get their comeuppance.
They do. Yes, we'll just leave it at that.
I was so glad when one of the episodes showed, because Ben kept talking about something that might happen, and I knew it didn't because I'd read the books. And I was so happy when an episode showed that I wasn't going to spoil it for him. Yay!
So, what do you guys have to recommend for our listeners? We'll come to Simon first.
On the music side of things, I've been listening to so much. Listening to a load of synthesizer stuff.
Which is very unlike you, Simon.
Yeah.
You're not usually a big fan of the,
not at all.
the electronic stuff.
I've just started another radio show called Two Knobs and an Oscillator, which is all dedicated to that sort of stuff. But I listen to a lot of that. But connected with that, and also connected with what I said about with the music project earlier, obviously with this podcast, you are aware of Mr. Timo Peach. Momo Tempo.
Yeah, he's been a guest on the show.
Yeah.
A very lovely man.
I'd say for people really to check out his stuff, stick Momo Tempo into Google and just look at his videos and things like that.
Yeah.
He has got a new album in the offing. And there is a new single coming out, and I can say no more than I have had a very small part in it.
I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
And that
there,
is an
Simon.
exclusive. And he'll probably tell me off for even saying something like that. So there's that. And also I'd say in connection with this whole podcast, I think one from what we were saying earlier, and hopefully Dave will go along with this, is that if there's something that embodies this crossover between the UK and America and Marvel, and something that embodies the best of that, is that original run of Excalibur. If you can get a trade paperback of what's the first one called? The Sword. I can't remember what the first one's called. But anyway, Excalibur by Chris Claremont and Alan Davis. Read it because it's just brilliant fun.
And by the way, it starts with an E and not an X. So
yes.
If you're looking in alphabetical order, look for the E's and not the X.
Oh yeah, no, because they did change it to starting with an X, and it was awful.
Yes, get the first run. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Alan Davis run with
avoid
an
the
E,
others.
not the X.
Yeah, and you get Doctor Who references and everything in it
Oh, sweet.
because there's some Lethbridge Stewarts in it.
Oh, nice. And what about you, Dave? Do you have anything you'd like to recommend?
I'll go with the comic book line here. There's I wouldn't say it's a great way to get into comic books in general. Well, actually, to the Marvel Universe in specific, but comic books in general. It's Hawkeye, the Archer from
the
Avengers. He has his own series now by Matt Fraction and David Aja, or Asha, AJA. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but it is one of the funniest lines I've read in a good long while. It's so clever. They play with narrative. They play with the narrative line. They bounce back and forth in time. They'll mix issues together. So when you read it again, it makes a completely different. You get a different feel for it. It's a lot of fun, and so I would highly recommend that. And it's a standalone. You don't need to know everything. If you're into comic books, you'll get a lot more of the in jokes, but I'm sure it reads fine if you don't. It's just a very witty way to do it. And are you all getting Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Yes.
Yeah, my wife is quite addicted to it. I must admit, you're probably going to hate me now, but found it a bit boring. So
well, you might want to look at it
after a couple of
again.
episodes.
No, I was thinking the same thing. I watched the first few episodes and lost interest, and then I've been seeing some of the stuff that's been going on. It's like, right,
yeah, if you can find the last 4 episodes, basically when it started, it ties into Captain America, Winter Soldier, and there's a point where all of a sudden it just explodes, and it's been a slow burn, but yeah, if you have the ability to catch up with that because it's some of the best TV on right now.
Am I right in thinking there's a character called Deathlock in it now?
Yes.
One of I knew him as a backup strip in Star Wars Weekly in the UK.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, there is a version of Deathlock in this, and it's some of the best TV on right now. Do yourself a favor.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for agreeing to come on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Well, thank you.
That's been really good. Really, really good.
And Dave, all the best with your record-breaking attempt.
Fingers crossed. Red Bull at the ready.
I didn't even mention the Deadpool movie. Have you seen they're talking about doing a Deadpool movie?
No, I hadn't.
But it's going to be like because obviously Deadpool, I don't really read the comic, but I'm aware that it's not really for kids.
No, it's not.
Yeah, they're going to go for a movie that actually does it justice rather than trying to go for like a 12 certificate and making it really muted. So it sounds like that could be in the offing.
Good.
Deadpool was in. Oh God, what film was it? It was Ryan Reynolds, wasn't it?
That was Wolverine, and that was not Deadpool. That was not Deadpool.
I don't like my superheroes boss-eyed. That's the thing. I don't.
Think
He's
about
got a mask on, hasn't he?
What, Ryan Reynolds?
Well, Deadpool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has. He should have, yes, but he wasn't in Wolverine. No.
Deadpool's whole thing is his tagline is the merc with a mouth. And he's funny, he's quipping, and then in the Wolverine movie they sewed his mouth shut. So I'm not sure why they even bothered doing Deadpool for going to completely neuter the character.
Sounds like a slightly naughtier version of Spider-Man.
Exactly. That's very much an apt.
And don't even
reference.
talk to me about the Fantastic Four movie, please.
So, what did you think of the Fantastic Four movie, Simon?
Well, do you know what? I actually quite like those last two they did because they're fun.
Yeah.
But the new one, I don't really know what they're doing because it's not Marvel doing it, is it?
Oh, didn't
No,
I hear
it's
somewhere?
Fox,
I think
I
it was Dave. Weren't you talking about this on Tower of Technobabble, where they're making one of the characters African American, but his sister isn't? Or
Yeah,
something,
that's
or-
the thing. It's like if I don't have a problem with them changing the character like that. It doesn't, he doesn't have to be blonde hair, blue eyed. But if his sister is, then that's either. I mean, that adds a narrative that you don't really need in a superhero movie. You've got
Yeah.
enough heavy lifting without. I wish they just went ahead and made his sister African American too.
Well,
That
when
would've-
we were talking earlier, and you've mentioned Fantastic Four, the first word you mentioned was family, which is for me is what
Yeah.
Fantastic Four is about.
Yeah.
And they're. It makes me so angry. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
And don't lose sight of what is great about something. I think they seem to think that maybe the powers are the most important things about them. I don't know.
No, and basically, Fantastic Four. It's two siblings, her husband, and the family. Best friend, the uncle to the children. That sort of thing. That's the nut of the whole affair.
Well, I mean, from what I gather, if the Transformers films have told us anything, that you can throw as much as you like at the screen, but if you don't actually really care about the characters, it makes for a pretty rubbish film.
Yeah, I think that third movie broke Ben. He literally says he doesn't really like to go to movies anymore because of that god awful Transformers. I'm trying
That's
to pull
sad.
him along back into trying to detox him.
The way Tim Burton has to twist everything so the Penguin becomes this squat bloke who spits black. And...
Yeah. Oh, and don't forget the fish guts. He eats fish guts.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Don't forget the fish guts.
I think that could be a little Easter egg. Dave just shouting, "Don't forget the fish guts," with no kind of
Yeah.
reference to what we've been talking
I'll tell
about.
you-
Just put that in there.
Another
Context free.
Yeah.
Yeah.